Productivity. Gladiator.
I'm Brian Nelson Palmer. On this show, I talk about personal, practical productivity skills. And this is a knowledge drop episode. I'm actually revealing the Gladiator Life Balance Blueprint. This is the outline that you've been missing to architect your best work-life balance. Here's the outline of how it's going to go. I'm going to talk about the background. We'll talk about what is good life balance. Then I have an exercise we're going to do together where you're going to get started right now building your plan, your blueprint. Then we'll talk about the implementation plan of how you implement this. And I'll talk about important notes and lessons learned for you for your journey with using this tool. This is the background on where this comes from. I started working on this back in 2014, and COVID happened in 2020, and this topic really went bananas. So I was actually really honored and happy to have an answer to help the folks who needed it during COVID. All those lessons still apply to this day, and the advice and the tips and the thoughts and the tool itself, the blueprint, has only gotten better and better. So I'm about solutions, right? This isn't about the research. It used to drive me crazy during COVID when everybody presented research that said that work-life balance was struggling. Chances are, if you're listening to this, you already know that your own work-life balance is a challenge. You don't need me to tell you how big of an issue this is. Let's fix it for you. So my question was, how can I make this actionable? And that is this plan. This is a game changer for you. It is the blueprint that you've needed for your life balance. Also, on that topic, we're going to call this life balance. I don't just call this work-life balance because there's actually 5 categories that make up your blueprint. Work is just one of those. If any of those categories are missing, you're going to feel out of balance a little bit. And it's not just balance between work and life, though work is certainly part of it. So here's a quick story. I remember a woman, Diane. She came to my training, and basically her life, she just worked, then went home, made some dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed. The next day was rinse and repeat. And she was basically just lived weekend to weekend. And even the weekends were short and tough because she was always playing catch up from the work week. So 3 months after taking my training, I ran into her, and she was a whole new woman. It was amazing. She started getting together with friends every Wednesday night after the training and this blueprint. And she ended up joining a trivia league. Turns out she's a trivia person, and she found out a way to work in time to start exercising and lost some weight too. She had more energy than she ever did before. She even met somebody at trivia night a couple weeks before I ran into her, and she'd actually been dating for the first time in a while, which is something that she'd never had time for in the past. So guys, Diane had a whole new glow about her, and it's your turn to start that transformation. Let's get you started right now, right here today. What is good life balance? There are 5 points to it. I want you to picture your life as a 5-pointed star. Each of the points of the star represents a critical and necessary part of your life in good life balance. Now, why is it a star? Picture a star-shaped table. Close your eyes. Picture a star-shaped table in your head. Now, imagine if one leg would fall over, if one leg would fall off or get damaged or somehow have a bad week or a bad month, that table would still stand up, because that is what good work-life balance looks like. If your table only had 1 or maybe 2 legs, like Diane, I mentioned she only did some stuff for herself and went to work, and that was pretty much it. That was more like a 2-legged table. And of course, a 2-legged table isn't going to stand up or balance very well. So when we talk about balance, 5 legs is how we achieve that balance. That's why it's 5 points. And I want you, how brightly your star glows. GLOWS is the acronym. It's G for growth. How are you growing and evolving each week? Then there's L for love and relationships. This is family, friends, your love life. O is for others. This is something bigger than you. Others are the primary beneficiary of these things, so you don't do these things for money in the O category. And then S is for self. This is for your personal needs and your personal benefits, sleep, diet, fitness, spiritual, me time. Those are the types of things in self. We're going to go more into those in the actual exercise. That's your overview. Now let's make it actionable. And I want you to try this. If you're like me, you just listen to podcasts or you watch YouTube videos passively. You know what's going on. You hear what they say. But now I actually want you to be active and participate while I go over this. So writing things down helps set them in your memory. And sometimes you have to see and hear things 7 different ways before it actually registers in your brain and you'll make a change. I'm asking you to do this, not just listen to this. So pause this episode if you need, while either you pull up a note in your phone, you can do this in your phone, or find a pen and a piece of paper right now. But I want you to write down these 5 headings. Call it the Gladiator Life Balance Blueprint. And I want you to write down these 5 categories as I talk about them and fill them in. So the first category, write down growth. And then underneath it, I want you to write down all the ways that come to mind that you're trying to grow or evolve as a person. What are you learning? How are you growing? How are you trying to evolve currently? So here's some examples. Are you interested in learning Spanish? Do you want to learn to dance? Are you going somewhere new around town that you've been wanting to try? Are you stepping outside your comfort zone? Like maybe you're going to an improv class or something. So feel free to pause this episode, pause this while you're listening to it or watching it, and continue marking down your notes for this category. And once you're done, look down at that list. And I want you to make sure you have as many bullets that are for your personal growth as well as you do for your professional growth. So many times people who start to feel unbalanced are only growing at work. That is the only place that they grow. Everything else is static and nowhere else. So that's why you need to grow personally too. So I want you to challenge yourself, put as many bullets down of ways that you want to grow personally and professionally. Pause if you need to, and then we'll keep going. Next up, I want you to write down love and relationships. That's your next category. And underneath that heading, I want you to write down love. And what goes into your love life? Maybe this is date night. So for an example, if you're single, maybe this means leaving a night open for a date. If you're single and would like to date or be involved with someone for your love life. If you're in a relationship, maybe that means you write down date night. Maybe you schedule a date with your partner and you write down anything else that you would want to do with your partner and for your love life, and write that down. Anything to feed your love life. Next, write down friends under love and relationships. And I want you to keep it on your radar that you need time with your friends. And then last up, I want you to write down family. When will you see yours? That's what we're talking about. And last up, write down anything else that generally comes to mind under the topic of love and relationships. Those 3 are the 3 main ones. But if there's anything else that comes up for you, this is where you'll put it. Now, the next category is, I want you to write down others bigger than you. That's the name of the category. Now, this is something that you support with your own time and effort. What are you doing to contribute toward your community? Something for others bigger than you. Do you do volunteer work? Is it a good cause that you work for? There's 2 keys to the things that go in this category. First, the primary benefactor of your work is someone other than you. That's why we call it others. This is why we started the category with that name. So it benefits someone other than you, and it's not for money. If you make money doing this thing, it's not for others. Examples. For me personally, I volunteer with Big Brother, Big Sister. So I spend time with my little brother 2 to 3 times per month. Also, I volunteer with the Whammies, which is the Washington, D.C. area Grammys. I contribute toward that program. So for you, this could be volunteering with your church, or it could even be creating and coaching a social sports team, like maybe a softball team or a trivia team or something. As long as the other people are the clear primary beneficiary of your actions, and that's what you're getting, and that's what you're driving at with this effort, that's the things that go under others, something bigger than you. Feel free to remember, pause if you need to while you're writing notes down. And then next up, we're moving on. Next category, write down work. Then write down 2 to 3 things that you're working toward in your career. Think about big goals. Nothing in your day-to-day work gets written in here. So whatever it is should be a way you're growing and evolving. This should not be anything that's a normal job function, or something that's listed on your job description wouldn't be in here. So examples, this could be a new certification you're working toward, or a goal that you're leading your team toward. We're not going to spend too much time here because, like I said before, people interested in this topic, this life balance topic, if you saw this episode title and you were interested, it's not because you life too much. It's because you probably work too much. So that's how you end up stuck in this area and why you seek out things like this. So we're not going to talk too much about work, but there is a category for work, and jot down 2 to 3 things that you're trying to achieve, goals, bigger picture things. Next up, in your last category, we talked about GLOWs, right? G for growth, L for love and relationships, O for others, W for work, and the last one is self. Write down self as your 5th category. And underneath, I want you to write down the word physical. And under here, you can put sleep, fitness, diet, and anything else that helps your physical self. So examples, maybe, do you need your bedtime on the calendar? Do you need more sleep? I do. That's actually how I get my sleep, is I put my bedtime on my calendar. That sounds crazy, but that's the way. If I know that I'm shooting for 7 hours, I need to look ahead and think, when am I going to bed and when am I getting up? How many hours do you need of the sleep? Write that down. Also write down diet and fitness. Where are you trying to get to with those? Because for most people, sleep, fitness, and diet are the 3 things that fall off the fastest whenever they're working towards something or they're caught up. Next up, write down mental. Meditation, wellness stuff. This could be journaling. This could be, definitely write down under mental, write me time and downtime. For me, for this one, after doing this drill over time, I now know that I need 1 weekday night and 1 portion, a morning, an afternoon, or an evening, 1 portion of a weekend day as me time. And when I say that, that means no talking. That means no computers, no phones. Sometimes I watch TV or read a good book, but it is me time. And I didn't know that starting out when I started this drill. But now that I've been paying attention to it, I now know that on a weekly basis, if I get those, that's the me time that I need. So you're tracking it now. Next, write down spiritual and anything that goes with that. Maybe this is religious needs or going to church. If spiritual is important to you, put it under self and jot down what you're looking for there. And then last up, write down fun and interests. These are things that are not for money again, right? These are for yourself. Maybe these are hobbies. Like I've got a buddy that builds those big, massive Lego kits. And my wife works puzzles. For me, this is boat time. I am a boat guy. I love being out on the water. So I want you to write down under your fun and interests, what goes under self? What do you need for yourself? Those are your 5 categories. That's the beginning of your blueprint. Feel free to pause if you're still jotting notes down. And now let's talk about implementation. So next up is the implementation. How do you implement your plan? And what you do is you plan your next week in advance. And here's the way that this works. I want you to go back and look at your categories, and I want you to identify your one next thing for each of the items you wrote down under each of the categories. Most of the things you wrote down will likely be big things. So look at your list and break each one down to just the one next thing that you could accomplish this week that would move you 1 step forward to this thing. Even if it's a super small step toward that goal, what would it be? Like, for example, if learn Spanish is the growth item that I mentioned earlier, maybe I write down, take one Duolingo lesson per day, or whatever your app is, Babbel or one of the learning lessons. Now, next, so you've pause if you need to, you're writing down the one next thing for each of the items. And next, you're going to plan your upcoming week in advance. You're going to look at the upcoming week and you're going to block time for each one that you can, and write at least one on your calendar from each quadrant. That's your goal initially. So for the first week, just make sure you have one from each of your categories. That's your 5 stars, your 5-legged table that we talked about, that star. I want one leg on the ground for each of those in your life balance blueprint and in your calendar, one from each category. Then over time, it's just making sure you check each of those categories in the upcoming week and then continue to adapt in the future weeks. So, for example, my quadrants have changed over time. My blueprint is a living document and it keeps living, and I want yours to be too. So what you wrote down right now, this isn't final. I want you to learn and evolve each week. So I hope you wrote it in a place where you'll be able to refer back to it and change it if needed. Also, just a note, there's no technology needed here. Under the list that all you need is the list you made, the blueprint that you wrote down, you need that, and you need your calendar, whatever that is. There are no special apps, no tracking sheets. This is you sitting down, looking at your calendar for the next week in advance, checking the sheet that you just created, check your blueprint and look at the calendar and see if you're getting each of your 5 quadrants in a way that feels good for you, and figure out when and how these things can happen. Now, let's talk about important notes and lessons learned along the way, because that was the basics. I just told you how to do it. Now, let me refine it a little bit with some tips and some helpful things. First of all, when? When do you plan your week in advance? Thursday at 2 p.m. That's my vote. If I could just tell you, do Thursday at 2 p.m. From experience, that's my favorite time. That's the best time. To this date, it's marked on my calendar at work. Thursday at 2 p.m. I am planning my work week in advance, and I'm planning my personal week in advance. Both personal and professional, you need to plan them both. And I like Thursday because then I can coast it. I look at the upcoming 10 days. So I go from Thursday all the way through the following Sunday. I'm looking at that time, checking my quadrants, my blueprint. I'm checking my blueprint to see what those 5 categories are, and am I doing something for each category in there. And if Thursdays don't work for you, though, that's fine. But I like going into Friday and the weekend already being ready for the next week. So Thursday at 2 p.m. is my main. But just know, if your week starts on Mondays, like mine does, mine starts on Mondays, Monday morning is too late. You have to plan your week in advance by Sunday evening. You have to do it in advance. Next tip. These categories are about importance, not about the number of hours. I had a guy once who came to one of my workshops and he raised his hand and he pointed out, hey, Brian, I work 50 hours a week. There is no way that I can possibly get 50 hours for self and 50 hours for others and 50 hours for, and of course, that's so true. And guys, that's no big deal. This is about importance, not about the number of hours. So you're going to work way more hours than you'll do for any of these other categories. And that's okay. Each of them has the same level of importance, though. So you are fighting for each one. You are putting a sense of importance, the same level of importance on each one. Next tip. Most of life balance isn't about the goals, it's about the journey. Here's what I mean. This exercise is focused on making your journey fulfilling. Think about it. You likely worked for months or even years to get your most recent certification or your college degree. And if you don't enjoy your life along the way to those goals, you lose. 90% of your life is the journey. This exercise sets you up to enjoy the journey along the way. Here's my favorite quote that kind of speaks to this. Viktor Frankl is an author. I'll put the link to this book in the notes. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a first-person account of he was a psychologist who was sent to concentration camps in World War II. So it's interesting to hear his account from a psychologist's perspective, studying people's brains and what that was like. And he said in his book, this is the quote, Mental health is based on a certain degree of tension. It's the tension between what one already has achieved and what one still ought to accomplish, or it's the gap between what one is and what one should become. He saw that when people were no longer on the journey of life in the camps, that's when they died. So making sure your life balance glows, like we talk about, that's how you can live that fulfilled life. You stay on your journey. Aim for progress, not perfection. That's the next tip. How do you feel at the end of the week looking back? Focus on getting a little better each week and celebrating your accomplishments along the way. Adjust what you have written under your categories as needed. Now, here's a special one. For love and relationships, in love and relationships, that category, I talked about love, family, and friends. I want to fine tune that. I've found that at least 2 of those need to be in person regularly each week, if at all possible, to get the best amount of fulfillment. Anything that's virtual must be in person occasionally. What I've seen over the years is that you can do one of these virtually, like maybe it's a phone call. You don't see them in person, and that's fine. But to really get the fulfillment from the love and relationships category, 2 of them are in person. So for example, for me, I have a date night with my wife, that's in person, and I hang with my friends in person. And for me, my family quadrant, I call my family regularly each week. So that one is the virtual one for me. And then every few months, I actually see my family in person too. And those are great. And on those weeks, it might be my wife and my family that I see in person, and my friends are the virtual one. So if it's always virtual, if all I ever did was see my family virtually and I never had the opportunity to look forward to seeing them in person, that's where you'll start to feel the weight of that connection. It'll feel like a weight on your shoulders. And also, let me say here, guys, seeing someone on social media, you cannot count seeing your friends on social media. That doesn't count. This is about the interaction in person. That's where the fulfillment is. Now, next tip, don't beat yourself up if one week doesn't go as planned. The next week, you'll plan your upcoming week in advance and you'll get right back on track. My favorite quote is by Mike Tyson. He said, "Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth," right? You probably heard that quote. And sometimes life is going to punch you in the mouth. It happens somewhat regularly, kind of scarily sometimes. And that's okay. The week that you're in might go off track, but you look ahead, you plan your next week in advance, you get up and you get back on track again. Keep focusing on that next week, and then the next one, and then the next one. You're looking ahead, and this is what keeps you on track. Next tip, compete with yourself, not others. You need to love yourself and the progress you're making. That's what's important. You'll have ups and downs on some weeks, but ultimately you are moving through your journey and you're progressing. So don't compare yourself to others. It's your race. It's your life. Focus on your growth and progress. Social media is the worst for this because it isn't real. It's like you're comparing your life to any other person's on their best day, because that's what they post on social media. And that's not fair. You'll just get discouraged. It's not going to help you grow. This is about your journey. It's not about theirs or competing with theirs. And I know that's hard, but don't compete with others. Just watch yourself and your progress. It's awesome. Next tip, do not overbook yourself. I know you're probably thinking, well, Brian, you just told us to put everything on the calendar. I know I did. And when life gets hectic, it's going to be tempting to add more activities to an already packed schedule. And then you're just going to be overwhelmed and you're going to be mad at me because there's too much on your calendar and you can't. And I understand. Instead, here's what I want you to do. If you're overwhelmed, if you're already overbooked, I want you to focus on trying to combine activities that can give you credit in more than one category. So here's an example. Jim was a guy who took my workshop and he was terrible about exercising, but he was really good at getting together and drinking with friends. He did that all the time. So here's what Jim did. He made some of his social events with friends into activities like going for a walk, walking around a park, or playing frisbee golf, or playing sports, maybe play softball, play soccer, or going to play golf and not using a golf cart, by the way, actually walking all 18 holes with your friends. That's a great way to get friend time and have an activity or some sort of exercise to go with it. That's a way that he can take his already packed schedule and add more diversity to it. So see if you can come up with activities that give you credit in more than one of these categories at the same time. Next tip, if you feel guilty taking time for yourself, it's important that you need to work through it. Your life balance depends on you getting some time to yourself and knowing how much of that you need and how you're going to get it. So, you know how on the plane they say, like, put your own life jacket on before you assist others? That is this situation. So here's one example that I have. Imagine you're a single mom. You might struggle taking time for yourself. You might feel guilty because, well, if you take time for yourself, that means it's going to be an extra expense because now you got to pay the babysitter, and then that's going to put you in a bad spot. And it's like dominoes, and it just all falls down. So after taking this course, maybe you start looking for creative solutions to this. Maybe you have a neighbor with kids as well, and you could set up a barter system. Maybe the neighbor takes the kids one night, and that gives you your me time. And then you take the kids another night. And, you know, better yet, because the kids have someone else to play with when they're all at your house, you actually might be able to start dabbling in Spanish lessons on your phone and do a free app like Duolingo on the night when you have the kids, because you're supervising them, but you can maybe, while you're supervising them, also get into some Spanish lessons. So look for these kind of opportunities. You need to stand up for the needs and time to yourself that you need. That's important over time. Next tip. This works in all stages of life with a couple of minor modifications. Here's the two most common ones I get. I just talked about GLOWS. GLOWS is the acronym which includes work, right? Well, what if you don't work? What if you're a student? Well, students, the category of work simply changes to school. So instead of GLOWS, it's GLOSS, GLOSS for them, right? It's the same process though. It's the same thing. They just put in their goals in the school area. Or the other one that comes up for me a lot is, what if they're retired and you don't work anymore? The other four categories are so important. That's G, L, O, and S, right? So I've been asked to share this training with retired folks in their retirement homes because everything in growth, love, others, and self, everything in those four categories still applies to you all the way up to the day you die. Every one of them. So you stay on your journey. Don't stop, because that's the end. Next tip. Demanding jobs are not an excuse to get out of this. I've worked with everyone on this, from attorneys to teachers to workers at nonprofits and everywhere else in between, in all the different careers. Even if your hours are unpredictable or crazy, you start your week with a plan to hit all of these categories. You're still planning your week in advance every week, even if its job is demanding. Now, what if I have one category that's empty? If this is a gap for you that you may have been missing in your life balance up to now, and you didn't know you were missing it. So do some soul searching. See if you can find one. Try to achieve one thing from each of the categories each week when you start this drill. The categories I shared comes from years of research, hundreds of weeks of practice, experience, and evaluation with myself and with others. I still use my categories. If you take the workshop, I show you my current blueprint. I have it and I share it with you because this is something that's still true for me to this day. So some categories might have more written in them than others, and that's fine. That's actually normal. Just know that each category is important. So work toward having something in each category. The flip side to that is, what if there's way too much in my categories and I can't do it all? I get this one a lot. A lot of you type A folks might have written down about 100 goals in some of these things. I've seen some amazing blueprints as people have done this. And some people that I've worked with have filled their categories with so much stuff that they can't possibly do everything in that list. You should have enough across all your categories to feel pushed each week. That's the right amount. It might be a little bit of a stretch. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it should be achievable while feeling a little push. That would be perfect. So remember, the goal of this whole thing is to feel your life is balanced, to feel good about your life. Your life is full. If you feel overwhelmed or like a failure because you didn't get all of the things on your blueprint, you have too much on your plate. You may need to take some things off of a category for now. That doesn't mean it's forgotten. That just means you can always bring it back later. Here's an example. I used to have 4 jobs. I had my day job. I had my passion career, which is this business, Productivity Gladiator. I was also doing some part-time work with a nonprofit, helping them with a program that they were running. And then I also teach group fitness classes. I was able to handle it all and still get meaningful activity from each of my categories each week. But the growth category, I've been wanting to finish learning Spanish. I studied Spanish in my early adult life after college, but I never finished becoming fluent. And it always frustrated me that I didn't finish that because it would be so handy. I live in Florida for most of the year, and that would be so handy. So with all this work that I was doing, I just didn't have time to fit in learning Spanish. So I took that off my life balance blueprint because at the time I was beating myself up because I never had time to do it. I never took the lessons. And it was still in my head, though, something that I wanted to do. So a year later, the program at the nonprofit had kind of run its course. So I rolled off that and I was back down to 3 jobs, which you can laugh at me for. But that rolling off that one job freed up a few hours each week, and I added learn Spanish back to my categories. And I spend 1 to 2 hours per week studying Spanish right now. And that's for no one other than me. That is my growth thing for me personally, and I enjoy it. So remember, the 5 categories guide your balance, and they're going to evolve just like you do. But what you're doing for each category isn't set in stone. You can change or you can update your categories whenever you want to shift your balance. Update your blueprint because it's going to change. Wow, that was a lot. So I've got 2 quick things to close this out. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that you tried the exercise and that you actually have stuff written down for your 5 categories. And 2 things to close it out. First, if you have a friend or a colleague who you've talked about the struggle for life balance with, would you send them the link to this episode specifically? I'd love to know that this info is getting to the people who it can help. And it certainly would be fulfilling for me to know that that meaningful connection with that friend would go toward that love and relationships thing for you, where you can have that conversation with that friend. Maybe you can call them and talk about some of this stuff afterwards. I would love for that connection to happen for you. And then the second thing is, there's more to this, of course. This episode is an excellent start, and it will get you started. If you want the full education on this, go to productivitygladiator.com, click on Get the Training, and choose the option for the individual. There is so much more you'll get in the online course, like demos of what successfully planning your week in advance looks like in practice, scheduling tactics, hacks. You'll see my blueprint that I use. If it's more than just you, the individual as well, maybe you're thinking about this for your team. I teach this to teams like yours all the time. So reach out to me too. I'd love to help. Thanks for liking and subscribing. And I do a lot with my email list, so join in on that fun if you want the best of what I send out. I love sharing Productivity Gladiator with you because together we're going to change your life. That's a wrap.
Productivity Gladiator.